Sherina Edwards is our speaker tonight, the Chief Executive of Intren, the largest WBE utility contractor in the nation. In this role, Sherina is responsible for strategic direction, human resources, marketing, operations, and financial performance of the U.S. 550 million private equity-owned utility contractor with over 2,000 employees, 14 regional offices throughout the United States. Sherina will discuss her path to the C-suite, executive presence, and shattering the glass ceilings along the way. And with that, I turn the mic over to Sherina. Sherina?
Really excited to be here with everyone. Thank you again to Dave and Dan for the invitation. A special thanks to my CFO, Derek Simon, who connected me to Dan. So happy to be here. And I have to say, there's something slightly intimidating about being before a group of financial executives on tax day. I don't know how we came about choosing this day to have this, but I'm either very, very fortunate to be here or not. So we'll see at the end how that goes. But if you're like me, you are exhilarated and excited of the opportunity for technology and innovation, but you're a little bit over the Zoom. And I know that you guys have probably been on Zooms all day, right? From probably very early this morning throughout the day. And you've probably been talked at, right? You've probably seen a lot of sharing of the screens and PowerPoints and charts and certainly numbers. So I'm going to rid you of all of that. And I really want this to be more of a conversation. I didn't want to have, I know they asked if I wanted the opportunity to have a slide or a couple of slides or a deck for you. And I thought I would help you out and say, let's not do that. Let's try to have something a little bit different at the end of the day. So I really want this to be more like a conversation where you're learning a little bit about me and my path to where I am now. And I'd love to, hear some more about you. And I'd love to, of course, answer questions that you might have. So again, it's a pleasure to be here. As Dave mentioned, I am currently the Chief Executive Officer of Intren. And for those of you who don't know, Intren is we're actually the largest women business enterprise, so WBE utility contractor in the nation. We have about close to 2,000 employees, and we're about 550 million in revenue. The company is about 33 years old and just has this great story, fantastic foundation. Was founded in '88 by a woman, and the woman is actually Loretta Rosenmeyer. She still is alive, but she realized, I would say about 5 years ago, that she wanted to continue the legacy of Intren, and she felt like it could grow more with her moving, to a different role. So she became chairwoman of the board, and she still is. And I'm proud to say that we have a woman majority board, as well as now myself. I'm the third person. So after her came Kelly Tomlin, my predecessor, and now I'm the third CEO to take the seat. And I've been here since September, and it's been a phenomenal ride. I never anticipated. People do ask me, was this your goal? And I thought about, no, I never planned to be a CEO, right? I certainly never planned to be the CEO of Intren when I started on the board a few years ago, but it's just sometimes, stars align and God has a path and you follow it. And that's really essentially how I got here. So I'll tell you a little bit about my background and kind of work my way up to where I am, and then talk about some of the principles that got me here. And I truly believe hard work is key, and it's a given, right? Whenever you ask someone, how did you get there? And they say, I worked hard. And I'm always like, duh. I mean, that's a given. So I never list that. We all work hard. That's something that's great. But there are certain driving principles that got me here. And a lot of those principles were instilled in me throughout my youth, throughout my childhood. And some of them I picked up along the way. So I want to talk about some of those, but just a little background. I was born actually in Manchester, England, and I lived there until I was 7. My parents then, my father got a job in New York, so they picked up and we moved to New York in, the early 90s, and it was a different world for me. But I was in England. When you hear about America, it's kind of like, oh my God, the land of the free. And you see these bright lights and it's so exciting. And so I couldn't wait, particularly moving to New York. I was way too excited. And I moved there and I grew up my parents were very adamant about finding a really good school for my sister and I, a really good neighborhood. And we actually moved to, I don't know if you're familiar with New York, but I grew up on Long Island in a city, really a town called West Babylon. And West Babylon was primarily, it was predominantly white neighborhood, but I loved our childhood. I loved living there. In my high school, we had about 1,000 students, and my sister and I, so in West Babylon, there were maybe further down, a few miles outside of our township, there was literally train tracks. And on the other side of the train tracks, if you went a few miles down, there was another neighborhood called Wyandanch. And my high school didn't have really any, they didn't have many African Americans, right? It was, like I said, predominantly out of 1,000 students, I think we had about 40 African Americans. 2 of those African Americans were my sister and I. We lived in West Babylon. Everybody else lived on the other side of the tracks, and they bussed them in so they could boost their diversity. Well, so I grew up in a place where the Black people were like, you guys think you're better than us. You live on the other side, so we don't really want to be your friend. And then I did have a lot of white friends growing up, but at some point I think they were kind of like, this is fascinating. I mean, you guys are like these Black people that we're now getting to know, but we were kind of in this place in the middle, right? So really, like I said, a lot of good friends with many white people, but sometimes I felt like we were excluded because we were Black, and then the Black people wanted nothing to do with us because we thought we were white. So I was like, tell my mom and dad, you've ruined my life. I don't know what you thought you were doing bringing us here, but it was the worst decision ever. I knew then in high school, and another thing is, quite frankly, I was in honors classes. My sister was like, I'm not doing that. Like, you're definitely never going to have any, friends if you're like that person. So, but I was like, I don't care. I want to be, I want to graduate valedictorian and everything. So I was in AP classes and honors classes, and I was literally the only Black person in any of my classes. I had no Black people in any of my classes. But I knew then that I wanted to go to an HBCU, and there was a TV show. I'm sure many of you are familiar with The Cosby Show, but there's a spinoff of The Cosby Show called A Different World. I know The Cosby Show is such a taboo thing to talk about these days, so I rarely say it. My mom's always like, don't tell anybody that you watch that show. But it's fine. I didn't support what happened with Bill Cosby. But anyway, there was a spinoff of The Cosby Show called A Different World, and it was based on college. And I watched that show and I was mesmerized. It was a historically Black college, and it was just, that's so funny, Man United all day. So there was a spinoff, and it was about this group of men and women who were going to college, and you'd see their growth through college. And they were Black. It was HBCU, and I was just fascinated. I was in high school, and I was like, "Oh my God, where is this? I have to go to this place." My mom explained to me that it's fictitious, of course, because it's a TV show. But she said, "But it's based off of a college called." She said it's a merger of 2 colleges. One is Spelman and one is Hampton. And the fictitious school on the show was called Hillman University. So it was a mixture of Spelman and Hampton, which is fascinating because I ended up going to Spelman, and my husband now that I met way later went to Hampton. So that's kind of crazy. But was so inspired by that show. And I said to my mom, I was in 9th grade, I was like, I have to go visit. And she's like, yeah, in a couple of years you can go. And I said, no, we have to go right now. So we flew to Atlanta. We went to visit Spelman, and I just was like in love. I'm watching all of these dynamic, and just, Spelman is the #1 HBCU in the nation. And it is a phenomenal place, right? They cultivate and nurture and educate Black female leaders. It is a place where most Black female doctors come. It is a place where most Black female lawyers come from. Roz Brewer, who is the new CEO of Walgreens, you might be familiar with, was just appointed to that seat a couple weeks ago. She's a Spelman alum. I'm a very big, happy, proud Spelman alum. And I'm just so proud of everything that institution stands for. So I went to Spelman and lived my best life those 4 years, and then left there and went to law school. I went on to law school in DC at Howard University. Now, Howard University is also another HBCU, and that was not my plan. My plan was absolutely to go to Spelman, but I knew that I wanted to go to we call them PWIs, public, predominantly white institution, to a PWI for law school. And so I applied to Emory and UGA and a ton of schools, and got into most of the schools I applied to. And then I didn't apply to Howard because it was the HBCU and I didn't want to go there. And they reached out to me and they said to me, we would love for you to apply to our school, and we will give you a academic scholarship. And I was like, this is kind of odd. I didn't get any scholarships from any of the other, maybe very minimal scholarships from some of the other law schools that I was going to. But I looked it up and I knew that I wanted to be a corporate lawyer. And I looked at the statistics of, corporate lawyers and the firms. I wanted to go to a top 10. I was very specific, a top 10 Am Law 100 law firm. And they were all recruited at Howard. Some of them did not even recruit at the schools that I had gotten into, but they recruited at Howard. This is where they go to get their best of the crop, right? African Americans. So then I realized, okay, in order to go to the school and be recruited to one of these top law firms, you needed to be in the top 10% of your class. And I was like, well, that's so easy. Of course, I didn't realize until you get to law school, that's not so easy to be in the top 10% of your class. But I decided to go and, avoid all the debt of law school. And so I went and I actually did. I mean, I put my head down for 3 years straight. I probably overstudied, but I did actually graduate in the top 10 of my law school class. And I had a lot of offers. And I ended up at a firm in Chicago, Cat and Meesh and Rosamond. And I practiced there. Some of you might be familiar with that firm, but I practiced there for probably four or so years until I got my big appointment to the commission. That led me to the Illinois Commerce Commission. And the Illinois Commerce Commission was, okay, so just to give you some background, it's the state utility, the state regulatory agency that regulates all of the utilities in the state. So energy, all aspects of it, electricity, natural gas, water, sewer, and telecommunications. And I had no idea. I remember I was in my office on a Thursday, was working on a brief. And for those of you who are familiar with how that works, you are just going nonstop. It's a large law firm, you're grinding, you're working really, really, really hard for that 3-page brief you're going to give to a partner that's eventually going to become a footnote, but neither here nor there. So I was working and I got a phone call and it was the governor's chief of staff. And I thought it was a prank call and I hung up. And then he called me right back and he's like, oh, I think we got disconnected. And I was like, oh my God, I am sorry. What do you want? And he said, I want to talk to you about, the Illinois Commerce Commission. And I said, I'm working on a brief, I don't have time right now. But the next day I went to a partner's office who was very politically involved and very familiar with the government. And I said, hey, I got a phone call from the governor's chief of staff. And he's like, no, you didn't. I said, what do you mean? He's like, well, he doesn't call people. I said, he doesn't call people. He called me. He's like, you probably got a call from somewhere else. I said, okay. He's like, what was his name? I said, Jack Lavin. He's like, that's the governor's chief of staff. I said, no shit. I just told you I got a phone call from him. He wanted to talk to me. And he said, well, what did he say he wanted? I said, to be on some board or something. And he's like, oh, well, what was it? I said, I don't know, something to do with commerce. He's like, well, was it like he's naming them and he's going down this list. He's like, Illinois Commerce. I was like, that's the one. He's like, that's not possible. And I was like, why? He's like, there are people who lobby for this commission, this particular one, for like 10 years. It's looking back, I'm like, he thought very little of me, apparently. I couldn't have gotten a call from the chief of staff. I couldn't have gotten this role. But in all fairness, he was just shocked. And he's like, there's no way. He said, it can't be that one. I was like, you know what? It probably wasn't that one. I said, well, I have a call with him later today. I'll find out. Got the call, went back in his office. I had the whole thing written down. I said, it was the Illinois Commerce Commission. And he gets up, shuts the door and says, who do you know? And I was like, what do you mean? He's like, who do you know in politics? How would you have gotten this opportunity? And I was like, I don't know. I mean, my extent of being political is that I vote. I was like, so I don't know how I got this, this role. But anyway, I met with the governor. I told the governor, thank you so much. I'm very interested in being a partner at my firm. So no, thank you. And the governor said to me at the time, Pat Quinn, he's like, I don't think you understand. You should call a few of your mentors and ask them about this before you say no. And I was like, okay, whatever, sure. So I did. And they were all like, are you insane? You have to take that job. Of course, it was like this huge pay cut. I had no interest in it, to be honest. There are people who really desire to do government and public interest, and that was not me, being fully transparent. I wanted to go to a corporate law firm, wanted to make a lot of money, and I wanted to do community service and give to those who are underprivileged and unfortunate, and I do a lot of mentoring, and I wanted to give back that way. I had no desire to be in government. Nothing about government ever even attracted me to any possibility of working in it. But everybody told me, you have to do this as an opportunity, and I'm so glad that I did. Because while I was there, I learned so much. I got so much exposure, these niche issues, which, by the way, I had no experience in utilities or energy. And I had to teach myself because in government, again, you have no training budget. And just to give you an analogy, on my first day at the law firm at Catton, we had this long 2-week series of orientation. And on the first day, our first session was how to get the most out of your orientation. I said, well, that's interesting. Now I get this job as a commissioner of commerce for all the utilities in the state where I'm making billion-dollar decisions. And on the first day, I get handed a 300-page Public Utilities Act and said, good luck. So I, relatively speaking, I was like, I don't know what I'm doing and I don't understand why I'm here. But I had to teach myself. I went to a lot of conferences and I listened to a lot of webinars. I met with so many people, and every time I'm literally taking copious notes and learning. And I think the most fascinating thing for me has been some of those principles that I told you I would interject throughout my background is that, number one, I always learned to dance when no one is watching. And I think so often my biggest moves have always been somebody coming to me. Honestly, I don't remember the last time I filled out an application or submitted my resume for something. Someone was asking me the other day for advice on a job search, and I was like, I don't know. I mean, honestly, I feel like people think that you should only be on. And growing up, I was a classically trained dancer, and I had this ballet teacher that walked around with a stick, and she would yell out what you should be doing, like, pas de bourrée or grand dame or whatever. And she'd smack the stick on the floor, and you would wait until you heard her stick all the way on the other side of the room, and then you kind of take a break. And she'd say, I'm watching you. And before you knew it, she'd be back over and say, you always need to be dancing. You don't only need to be dancing while I'm watching. And that motto stuck with me. People tend to want to really overachieve and do really well when they know eyes are on them. But it's the moments when people are not looking at you, or when you think that they're not looking at you, that they really are taking note. And to this day, I do not know how I got to the Illinois Commerce Commission. The governor told me that there was a person who thought highly of me, saw me work. They knew that I didn't know anything about the subject matter, but that I was a hard worker and that I would learn it and would do a good job at it. And that's the kind of person that I am, right? I may not know, but I'm going to learn it. I'm going to figure it out. And again, it was somebody who I didn't know was watching me, paying any attention to anything that I was doing. Maybe it was while I was working on a brief. Maybe it was I did a lot of pro bono when I was at the firm. Maybe it was something when I was doing that, but I have no idea. And it was honestly the greatest gift of my life, that appointment. And I wish I could thank them, but to this day, I still don't know who it is. And the promise to the governor was that they wanted to remain anonymous. That I could never know who it was, which I just thought, wow, that's amazing. And particularly in government where particularly in that role, where there are so many favors to be had. And that person specifically said, I want to be anonymous. I think that said a lot about them. So one example of dancing when no one is watching. So I get to the commission. I have, it was a 5-year term. I was appointed as the youngest in the state. And I guess in the history at the time of the nation. So I was appointed, I think I was 28. I just turned 28 when I was appointed. It was a phenomenal experience. Again, the exposure. And I wanted to maximize every bit of it. By the time I left the commission, I had been to every continent but one. I hadn't been to Antarctica, bummer. But I went to speak. I was asked to testify. I testified before Congress. There are two things that stick out. I have had a lot of amazing experiences, but two things. One, I was appointed by President Obama to lead the PHMSA working group. So I reported up to the Secretary of Transportation and advised the Secretary on pipeline safety incidents and best practice sharing on proprietary matters. And that was obviously a huge honor. And the other one was I was named a 2017 Eisenhower Fellow, where essentially I was given ambassador status. And I went to South Africa and Australia to focus on their shift to renewables and how we could better our program here in the United States. And that was, again, another phenomenal experience. And it's these types of things that has allowed me to really build on the relationships, because I believe that, and another nugget is that relationships make the world go round. If you think for a second, it is all about what's in your head and how smart you are so getting it wrong. It is not, and it's not always either about who you know. People say, oh, it's not what you know, it's who you know. It's not. It's about who knows you. And the only way for people to know you and to think positively of you, right? Because a lot of people can know you and think you're just, a jerk or whatever, but people have to know you and know that you have good work ethic. They have to know that you're a nice person. They have to know that you're a team player. And that is what I think I've always tried to, and quite naturally, just being me, try to always live up to. And I think that has allowed me to get into many doors and rooms that a person that looks like me wouldn't normally be in. I've been a lot of firsts. I'm oftentimes, either the youngest or the first Black or the first woman. And it's because I think of those principles that have driven me, right? The dancing when no one's watching, the networking. I always say that your network is your net worth. And there's just no way, again, when I was mentoring attorneys at the firm when I was there, because I led the energy practice after I left the commission at Quarles Brady. And when I was at the firm I was mentoring some other attorneys, and they'd say, well, I can't go to this or I can't do that. A partner had asked an attorney to go to this event, and she said, no, I have work to do. And I said, no, you cannot say no to the head of your practice group. You go to that dinner with the head of your practice group, and then you stay up until 3:00 and you get that project done. Or you wake up early tomorrow and you get that project done, right? And she's like, well, it's all about, the hard work. I said, it is not. And if you think for a second that it's only about the hard work, you're so wrong, and you are not going to ascend. It is so important that you deliver good work product and you do a great job, and everything that you do is good, but you absolutely have to match that with knowing people, with networking, with commingling with people. And oftentimes in professional services industries, and I'm putting my attorney hat back on, and I know I kind of liken that to you all, you tend to be more introverted. You tend to not want to be, like, the last thing you really want to do is to be at a dinner or at a networking hour with a room with 300 people, and they have their wine and they're all talking, and you rather, go home, sit on your sofa and just do whatever you want to do. But that's the nature of business, right? That is the only way. And again, I say your network is your net worth. And it's the other thing I do is I say, you got to figure out how to turn your contacts into contracts, which just means make the business. And the only way that you can do that is if you have the network to start it off. So I just stress that all the time because it is so important, I think, for people to realize those connections. So I left the commission, went to Quarles, was there for very little time before Loretta, who I built a relationship with, Loretta Rosenmeyer, I built the relationship with while I was on the commission. I led the efforts for Illinois, our supplier diversity efforts. I founded the Illinois Utilities Business Diversity Council, which is still in existence today. And it consists of the CEOs of all the Illinois utilities. And they have to, we established legislation, and each of our utility CEOs in Illinois have to come on, the packages are submitted on April 15th, so today, but they generally then in May, they come and they testify before the commission, and we ask them about their spend, their diverse procurement, why has their spend gone down, who are they using, and we look at their numbers and make sure they're legit and all of that. And we were a trailblazer because another state started to do, and they wanted to replicate our program. So that was huge for us. So when I did that, I learned about this woman from, at the time, the CEO of ComEd, called Loretta and Intren. And what was so fascinating to me about Loretta was her desire to help others, right? Her desire not just to be, many of the suppliers are for self, and her desire to want to build others up. So I asked her to come testify. I oversaw the program, and I said, I want you to come testify for this year's Supply Diversity Forum. And she said, I'd love to come. Can I bring someone with me? I said, sure, you can. I thought she was bringing someone else from Intren, from her company with her. Well, she brought another woman. Her name is Stephanie Hickman, who is the CEO of Trice Construction, which for all intents and purposes is a competitor of Intren. And I said, is she a guest? I thought maybe she wanted to sit in the audience. She goes, no, she's testifying with me. I said, but you're testifying about Intren's story and about the work that you do. And she says, I know, she's a part of it. And that, for me, I remember Loretta actually yielded most of her time to Stephanie. And afterwards, I said, Loretta, why did you do that? And she's like, because it is my job to make sure that other people are as successful as we are. I feel like I'm not doing my job, as a woman of business if I'm not supporting other women. And it reminded me of something that my mom used to say to my sister and I from as young as I can remember. I don't care how many degrees you have, how much money you make, what your title is. If you have not turned around and made 3 other people, not 1 or 2, we were high achievers in my household, 3 other people as successful as you or better, you're not successful. So don't come home and tell me about it because you've not done your job. And when Loretta said that, it hit home for me because that is something, like I said, my mom, we were those little kids at food banks when we were like, she was like, you're going to realize you're going to turn around and help other people. You're not just going to, soak up all these things that we're providing for you. You're going to give back. So we learned about giving back very early. And Loretta, and honestly, that story for me, I mean, I leaned in and I learned more about Intren, and it only it's interesting when you're willing to share your piece of the pie, your pie grows. And because of that, I would pull Loretta into more things and make sure she had even, other opportunities. And she was so well respected in the industry and the changes that she had made. So when she asked me to sit on the board of Intren right after I left the commission, I was honored. And I did that. And I wanted to really learn and dig in. And I remember saying to my predecessor, Kelly, Kelly, this is the issue I see, and this is just from what I saw, the board meeting, you're focused on more governance, not necessarily operations. So I said, this is the issue that I see. I said, I think you're missing this regulatory compact, and I think you're not understanding the work, right, the work that you're doing and how it ties to rate recovery and the rate case mechanism for the utilities. And she's like, what do you mean? And I said, well, look, this is the compact. I said, they can only recover so much. This is where their capital expenditures are going, right? This is where they're only going to put the money into what they know that they can get a return on their investment in. So if you know that this focus is going to be electricity this year, if you know that for this particular utility, it's going to be here, that should be your focus. Your job should be ahead of it. And so I started working closely with her, and we probably met maybe once a month. And that's when I really started to learn more about Intren, about the business, the operational side of Intren. And again, I think it's just a matter of trying to go above and beyond and to feel like you want to grow. And so when she decided that she was leaving for another opportunity, which was a great one, and she reached out to me and said, I think you should be my successor. And I said, why? Why would I do that? I got past the imposter syndrome that we so often have. I felt like, okay, maybe I can do this. And I remember going to the board and letting them know that I was interested in being considered. And one of the board members said to me, you bring so much to the table. You're a lawyer, your regulatory background, your relationship. She's like, but you're deficient. You have a lot of deficiencies. And I remember laughing because I think that was the first time I had actually been told in my life that I was deficient. I mean, maybe people thought it, but I just never had somebody say that. And so at that point, I felt really good because I was like, okay, game on. At this point, you've now just told me that I have to do this. So, and I gave it all I had, and they decided they were going to do a search firm. And I went through, I think, 1 or 2 rounds, I did some, preliminary interviews, and then they said they're going to focus on the search group to narrow it down. They did that for a few rounds and then came back to me and said, so you can do this, and we're going to let you be the interim CEO and see if you burn the place down, and then we'll come back and decide if you can have this job. And so again, I just was very confident. And as a matter of fact, when I was named permanent CEO, they told me I'd have the interim role for basically I would be on probation for 6 months. And they came back a few months later and said, you know what, you've blown us away. We want you to be the permanent CEO. And it's funny because when I started telling people, I'm a permanent CEO now, they said, oh, we didn't realize you were interim. And I said, I know, I really wasn't in my own head, but for the purposes of the board, I wanted to make them feel better and let them think that I was the interim. But in my mind, I was permanent from day one. But it was just that, I think that you have to be confident, not cocky, but I think you have to be confident. I think you have to have, executive presence, which is something that I think a lot of people fail to do and fail to have. And these are, again, nuggets that I've learned along the way that have helped me succeed. I think you have to, too, know what you don't know and be humble about it. And I have, and have very strong people where you're weak. I have, and I'm not just saying that because he's on this call, but I truly believe I have like the best CFO that I could ever have. And you realize quickly as a leader, you have to realize that it's not, CEO is to me is a title. It is not it does not mean that I make all the decisions on my own. It means that I have to own those decisions, but you have to have really good people in a team that you're comfortable bringing in and bouncing things off of and allowing to do things, right, that and allow them to grow as well, give them responsibilities and say, okay, I trust you, I'm gonna allow you to do this. And for me, one of my, I would say, biggest, and I guess I'm telling this entire group of financial executives that my weak spot is finance, right? But I think I've, definitely grown so much more and getting someone like my CFO who has taken the time to, I hate to say this to you guys, but sometimes you finance people just talking like numbers and you're in your head. If you're not that way, you're dazzled and you're just confused. But having someone, I think, and having the skill to be able to distill those numbers and associate those to a meaning and to help you understand in your way of understanding, I think is a huge skill. Mine does that. And creating a value, which I think I know for me is, I know I have to have a very strong CFO. I have to have one that I trust. I have to have one that, that is excellent and that others trust and that understands the business. Because at the same time as not being so comfortable with that, I had to learn the business. I had to learn the operations. I had to figure out what was going on with our marketing. I did some restructuring, right? We have HR and legal issues. And I would say over 9 months, I have grown to know and feel very comfortable saying that I have a very strong understanding of this business. And of course, every day, I'm continuing to grow that. But I will say, and I've told so many people this, I have a lot of mentors from my college still. And I will say my biggest regret of college, believe it or not, at Spelman, my biggest regret, I do have one, is that I didn't take finance classes. I knew that I wanted to go to law school. I met with my guidance, what would you call them? Like your I forgot what they're called, but kind of like your track counselor or whatever. And she's like, oh, you don't need to take, you tested into, you don't need to take finance classes. Or I think everybody should take finance classes. I think everybody should have a strong understanding of finance and generally accounting principles. And I didn't do that. And that's probably my biggest regret about college. But now I think I just have to work really hard at this point to make sure that I'm delving into that and expanding and growing my strength and skill set. And I was talking to someone the other day, and she's like, she's a CFO at a publicly traded company. She's like, you're really not, you're really hard on yourself. You have so much more of the skills than you think that you do. But I don't know, I tend to think that we can always do better. So generally, here I am now, the CEO of Intren, and we have been doing phenomenally well. I'm so glad to be here. It's been really trying to grow in growth mode. We've done had a lot of tactical movement over the last few years. And now we're in strategy mode and excited about it and really looking to expand and grow both inorganically and organically. And I'm so excited to have the opportunity to continue that great legacy of that woman, Loretta Rosemeyer, I told you about, and to do it in a way that is industry changing for us. And I believe that's what we'll do. So that's my story, and I'm sticking to it. I see, Susan, I'm not sure if you're going to moderate these. I see some of these have been coming in.
Yeah, Sherina, so Dave is going to go ahead and he'll work on Q&A with you. So if we're ready to do that, we'll ask everybody to put any questions in chat, and we'll bring Dave on with you.
Are you ready, Sherina?
I am.
Okay, yeah. So we'll tackle the first one from Frank here. So Frank's asking, what about the culture has changed since you took over the organization?
I think I'll say that one of the things that I addressed, so just to be clear, so Intren, again, just for easy numbers, we're close to 2,000 people. And out of the 2,000, I think the last I checked we were about, let's say, close to 200 women and probably around 50 African Americans and maybe about 75 Hispanics. So obviously, right, diversity is not our strength. It's so funny, I had a CEO say to me the other day, you guys are one of our best suppliers. You guys are our largest diverse supplier, but you're also our most non-diverse diverse supplier. And I had to take a step back and think about that, right? That's not a good place to be. But so anyway, we have to work on diversity. And I think that one thing that I've realized that I think a lot of people don't do well with diversity, particularly over the last year, is they try to shove diversity down people's throats. And you just, quite frankly, you can't do that. That does not lead to success. It does not lead to buy-in, and it does not lead to a collaborative, healthy environment. So I think, in trying to focus on diversity, I've tried to make it very clear that, look, you will not, I will never, and anyone that works for me will never promote you, terminate you, demote you based on the color of your skin, your gender, your ethnicity, your race, none of that. We will do all of those things if your work product is not where it needs to be, right? So, but I think that there was, one of the first things I did, probably not one of, but upfront, I did make 2 terminations. I made some changes, executive changes in the organization. The first executive hire I made happened to be a woman, and she happened to be a Black woman. So there were 2 executives that went out that were white men, and then the one hire was a Black woman. That sent a smoke signal, right? That caused a couple of, ruffled some feathers, I think, in the organization. It led to some discomfort. Quite frankly, a lot of people were thinking, Sherina's here. Mind you, though, when I started at the company, I was the only Black female, the only Black person executive, the only female executive. But for them, that went against it went against the norm, right? Sherina is Black. She took out 2 white men and she brought in a Black woman. That was the headline. And so I had to realize I could say, I don't really care, but that's not leadership. I had to take a step back and I had to put my finger on the pulse of the culture of the organization and say, okay, these people are concerned. So what is it that I need to do as a leader? I need to make sure that they understand that I am, again, not making any promotions, demotions, changes based on race, ethnicity, or gender. What I'm doing is I am making sure that people in their roles are able to do their roles and perform in the way that is most accretive to this business. And I think I started having very real conversations because people don't want to talk about diversity. It's uncomfortable to them. But I started having very real conversations, and I think that gave people some comfort. So to answer that question, Frank, about the culture, I think that I'd like to think that people are a little bit more comfortable. I try to be very transparent, and I think they appreciate that. We have town hall meetings, quarterly town hall meetings, and after each one, I get really nice messages. I try to go out into the field and I interact with our people and let them know that, look, we are all on the same level. I don't care what it is that you do. I'm never too good or too busy or too whatever to interact with you. And I think that has really given people some comfort in the organization, and they feel like they like, even if they're getting bad news or news that they wouldn't love to hear, they appreciate that they're getting it. Everybody appreciates transparency, and I try to be that person. So I would like to say about the culture, I think that people feel a little bit more at ease, and I say what's on my mind, right? I say, I'm going to tell you, if you suck, you probably won't have a job here. It's not going to be because you're, white or because you're a white man. It's going to be because you can't do your job and you never should have been there. So I like to be very honest, and I'd like to say that people have comfort in that.
Excellent. Okay, another one here that kind of revolves around your network is your net worth, I believe, and I kind of goes with the question I was going to ask. Sherina is asking a question. Outside of working hard and being great at your job, how do you make sure that the right people know you and see what you are doing?
So a lot of that, honestly, it's organic. So I think that if you, so for example, I'm looking, it says there are 36 participants here, right? I'm speaking, and for whatever reason, and I've been speaking a lot lately, let's say out of every time that I speak, one of those people tend to circle back with me and something comes out of it, whether it's a great connection or it's, I'm in another organization, can you speak here? Or there's always generally at least one connection, right? Or more than that sometimes, but at least one. And I think this is organic for me. I'm talking here. I didn't have an agenda. I'm telling my story, so it's very organic. And I think sometimes people focus so much on what do I have to do to get attention? Quite naturally, when you're good at what you do, it'll come, right? It will find you. People will find you. They'll gravitate towards you. Another thing I like to think that is helpful is people don't, LinkedIn, I utilize LinkedIn a lot. I know some people really hate it, but I find that it's good to talk about what you're doing. I talk a lot about my company. I talk a lot about when I'm speaking. I posted about this event today. I spoke for my college's 140th Founders Day over the weekend. I posted about that. I find that LinkedIn, if used for the right reason, can be a great networking tool as you continue to grow into your industry. Got it.
All right, before I get to Sherry's question, I'm going to kind of circle back to the question before that. There's a follow-up from Chris White. I think he's asking, how do you get people to buy into your vision, or your changes, either tactical or strategic?
That's a good question. So earlier today, I had a meeting with our leadership team, and I was giving them some news about some changes that were going to be made at the company. And naturally, right after, I knew that I wasn't going to get a ton of questions on the screen, but it's the meetings after the meetings that really count. And I know who the people are, they're going to get the phone calls, right? So then a couple hours later, I called those people and said, okay, what were the questions and what was the feedback? And they said, people are very, they're supportive. And what I said to my team was, look, these are the changes. You guys are the leaders, and I personally, I'm very comfortable. I'm very, very excited about them. I think you should be too. I think we should all be very excited about these changes. I said, but let's just say that maybe you're not. Your team doesn't need to know that. As a leader, you don't get to share that with your entire team, right? You have to understand that as a leader, you have to, in a sense, I call it the fist up mentality. Everything that happens in this room happens in this room. But then when the decision is made and we all open the door to go out, you have your fist up and you are in solidarity and in support of what has happened, because that's called leadership. Our people can't afford to see us sweat. There are many things that my board has directed to me that I have to then turn around and tell to my executive team, and I have to support it. I can't go to them and saying, oh my God, this is going to be the worst thing ever, guys. I have to be supportive. I have to have the backbone. I have to be, I have to be confident. I have to have my head held up, because if I crumble, they crumble. If they crumble, their teams crumble. And it's a reciprocal, domino effect. So I think in order to get buy-in, you have to have really supportive leaders that understand that. They understand that that's part of leadership, because the buy-in from the people comes from the buy-in of the leaders. And really, when people trust you and they, value you, I really do believe that my team, my executive leadership team, I believe that they trust me and they know that I have their best interest at heart and that I will go to bat for them. I also reciprocally trust each of them. And I think that's important in the buy-in process.
Got it. Thank you. All right, we'll jump back to Sherry's question, because I think it's for us finance people, and since you have your CFO on the call and spoke highly of him, Sherry's asking a question basically about the CFO to the CEO and how how she asked, because the CFOs are usually not considered for that top job, but actually in her view, again, let me see if I can get to how would the CFO that you have have been better prepared for the top job, like the CEO, how to make that transition. Okay. And again, I'm talking about the CEO that's just not about numbers, but actually, in my view, the amazing perspective. Okay. Yeah. So the CFO to CEO type perspective, I think, is where Sherry's going. So.
Okay. I think that, and I actually sit on a corporate board. It's a water utility. And actually I just was we did a CFO search. So I went through the process and we hired a national, search firm and everything, and went through this process. And I will say that what's interesting about a lot of CFOs is that they are very boundary focused, right? They almost work in a box, right? This is their area of expertise. They're going to focus on the numbers. And I think that's such a detriment. I think, and unlike mine, I will say, whereas he actually knows the business, he makes it his bit. You really have to, right? You have to understand the business, because everything is driven really through finance. You're measured on your financial success. We have, like I said, a PE investor. They're focused on what our earnings look like. They're focused on EBITDA. They're focused on eventually what's going to be their multiple. And so everything, right, success of the company it goes through that finance funnel. And so in order to do your job well, I believe as a CFO, you have to truly understand the business. Now, Derek nor I know how to go put poles in the ground, but we can tell you, right, how it should be managed. We can tell you about profits. We can tell you what the margin should be. We can look and say, what the hell is going on in this particular group when we see the margins aren't where they're supposed to be, right? We're not managing the operations, but we're overseeing it from a financial standpoint. But I think that the more you can learn about the business, and also something that we've done at Intren and we want to continue to do is move people around, let them get cross-trained, right? Don't just have your finance people in finance, let them go get some operations experience. Don't just have your operations people just so focused on that. Make sure they have a strong financial acumen and understanding of the business. So I think that the best path from a CFO to a CEO, I certainly think it could be done, but you have to show that you understand that business, and you should be showing your CEO that you not just understand the business, but you're taking and making decisions and recommendations based on the success of the overall business and not just what it looks like from a financial lens.
Excellent. Thank you. All right. So another question that brought up is, how would you define executive presence?
I love that term. Okay. Executive presence is about the confidence that you carry and the conviction that you have, right? It is about how you speak. It is about when you speak as though okay, let me tell you, and I'm, again, very transparent. There are so many times where I really don't know the answer, but do you really think that I'm going to let my entire board of directors know that I don't know the answer? I'm not, right? I'm always going to appear confident. Even if I'm saying, that's a great point, I want to get back to you, I'm going to speak on it with conviction in the way that does not make them panic that I don't know the answer. And I love analogies, and I like to think of executive presence like this. Think about a person walking through a room. There's two ways to think of that room. Think of the person that walks through the room, and then think about the fact that the room was walked through. there's a difference to me. Somebody with presence, somebody with confidence, somebody that doesn't speak to you like they're always asking questions. You know, when people make statements, but they turn their voice up at the end of their sentence to make you feel as though they wanted your validation, that means they're lacking that executive presence. It's somebody who appears as though I don't have to go and do a second check on what they're just telling me, because they're speaking with commitment, they're speaking with poise, and they're commanding the room. It's making eye contact. It is, people struggle with that, particularly these days when I'm mentoring. And I do a lot of mentoring, particularly before COVID, obviously, but I was in classrooms actually a lot speaking to students, and particularly college readiness. And kids, like, because they're always on their phone, they look down, and I'm like, absolutely not. You look me in my eye when you're speaking. People don't do that anymore. They don't look you in your eye. They don't have a firm handshake. All of these things are executive presence. I personally, when I think of someone who, you know, I would want to represent me, or if I'm not there, I want to represent the company. I don't want some person who is so afraid of their own shadow, or who cannot get a sentence out with conviction to represent the company. I need somebody who's going to be bold, you know, courageous, confident, and speak with conviction. And that, in a nutshell, is executive presence.
Excellent. And very interesting. Okay, so spinning the question a little bit about working for a PE owned entity. Michael McNair. Oh, Michael's asking how you find working for a PE owned asset company and the pressure to drive the valuation for a liquidity event or sale.
Well, I don't know. Let me see if any of them are on before I. No, I'm kidding.
Good point.
You know, it's definitely different, and I think that you just have to understand. I think if you understand what their end goal is, right? I know when I'm speaking, I know that they see success in the multiple, and they see success, right, in certain things. They don't necessarily care about other things, you know, that I may think is extremely important, you know, like maybe a regulatory aspect of something, or they just want to know how it's impacting the numbers. You know, it hasn't been, and again, I sat on the board before getting to Intren, and there were some times we've seen some low valleys, right? There were some times where we were not doing so well. Now we're doing phenomenally well. So it's kind of a different story. But I remember being in the room with these same people, these same directors, and it was very difficult, right? They don't like to not make money. They don't like us to not do well. So I think really once you understand, there've been a couple of times where I've had to call them and say, hey, look, I'm just going to let you know this is what's happening. Do I think that we can overcome it? Yes. But I think as long as they know, and again, it's back to that conviction, they know that if I'm comfortable and I say, look, my job is to anticipate what's coming around the corner, and they're comfortable with that. I actually just spoke to the shareholder, the director that told me that I had some deficiencies. She just called me today and literally sang my praises for like the second time in 2 weeks. And I'm like, wow, this is amazing. But, you know, I think it's because, again, they are, I think I have shown them, I think in a way that we're a company and we are able to look around the corner. We may have some months that we're not doing necessarily as well as others, but you have to, I think, give them that notice, right? Give them that, give them the comfort that you're going to recover. And I think that as long as you do that, you can do well with them. But I will not lie, there's pressure, undoubtedly. PE should stand for pressure exerted.
Very good. All right, I'm going to go and ask a question of my own. So if you could go back in time and give a piece of advice to a going to college, first year college student of yourself, what would that advice be?
Be present. That would be my advice. I think so oftentimes, and even sometimes as the CEO or as anything, you tend to always be looking forward to like the next thing, like, okay, next week is going to be right. But I feel like sometimes we just don't take the time to just be present. And that can be from a personal standpoint or a professional standpoint, right? I'd like to think about it in college. You're so busy rushing through college and thinking about, oh, what job am I going to get? Or where am I going to go to grad school? Or what am I going to do? That sometimes you miss out on some of the opportunities that are right before you. And that just sends you into this downward spiral kind of that you're in for the rest of your life of constantly thinking ahead, because society tells us we have to do that. Society tells you always have to be a step ahead. But I think in that we lose so much of the moment, right? We're so focused on right? These days we're so used, people walk around doing this. I remember right before COVID, we were, I was at a concert and like phones were, I took my niece to a concert and literally all these like 15-year-olds had their phones in the air. And I'm like, what are they doing? They're so busy taking a picture. They're watching the concert through their phone so they can put it on Instagram or Facebook. I'm like, you're missing the moment because you're so busy trying to focus on the picture that you're going to tell the world that you were here, right? You could just watch it yourself. But I think even as young, particularly college age students, they miss moments because they're not present. So that would be my advice.
Be present. Got it. All right. And I have to ask, in this crazy world we're in, how has COVID affected your business?
You know what? I have to say, we are one of the very few. We've been very blessed, and our company's done pretty well during COVID. Again, we had a record financial year last year, which most companies cannot say they had during COVID. We, as you know, our people are deemed essential workers, so that work did not stop. We did have some interruptions really on our gas side of the business where we were doing, like, for example, meter move out programs, so we couldn't go into homes and things like that. But that was really a small amount of our business. For the most part, it was really business as usual. We were just being very careful. We also did not have a lot. 150 COVID cases out of a couple thousand workers is really good. We had a very strong, I have a phenomenal vice president of safety that did just a fantastic job of keeping up with safety precautions and COVID precautions, COVID testing, contact tracing. So we fared very well, very, very well.
Excellent. Wow. That's good to hear. All right. And I know we're at 4:55, but there's a question from Otis. He's asking, is there any important decision you've made that you wish you could revisit? And if so, why?
Just at Intren or like just generally in my profession, in my career?
I'm going to wing it and say in your career.
Yes. When I first got to the commission, it was kind of like I'd been at the firm as an associate, but it was my first job in management, really my first time managing someone. And I remember I terminated my senior, I don't say what role the person was in, but I terminated her because she just was not, I was coming from a very large law firm, right? That means that you leave usually after the partner leaves and you leave when the job is done. Now I went to government and literally it's like 4:30, they turn the lights off regardless of what you have the next day. And we had this huge rate case and we had, all of the media coming. It was a really, really big deal. And I remember saying to her, can you please, well, I didn't say, can you please stay? Because I kind of thought it was a given. And so at 4:30, I saw her light go off and she was like, okay, I'm leaving. And I was like, what do you mean you're leaving? We have all this, we have to still go through these briefs and I need to get prepped. And by tomorrow, she's, key on the case. And she's like, but it's 4:30. And I was like, that means nothing to me. Anyway, so she left. I did speak to her after that. And then she did it again. And then I terminated her. I think probably, and it was very, I think, rash, right? I probably didn't need to go about it that way. I think about that a lot, honestly. Gosh, that was bad leadership, bad management, right? I should have had more of a conversation to see how can we make this work, right? This is what this role entails. Can you, this is what I need. I'm not asking that you stay until 7, 8, 9 every day, but when we have, major multi-billion-dollar cases before us and the media coming, it might be a time that I do. I did not talk through that well. I literally just made that decision and I thought it was premature. And so I think about that a lot. I think that was a very bad leadership and managerial decision that I made, and I do regret it.
Got it. Okay, let's see. One popped in here. Okay, so let's go one of the final ones at 4:58. Given the global travel you've been doing and the network you built in the years past, how have you kept those relationships active, and how have you found ways to turn those contacts into contracts in any capacity?
Yep. One thing I pride myself on, that's a really good question, is meaningful relationships. So what that means, I talked about LinkedIn earlier. You don't just wait until someone's status or their title on LinkedIn changes before you reach out to them. It's consistent communication. And I pride myself on having these really substantive relationships that are not, they're genuine. And so I don't speak to them often or every day. Every once in a while, maybe I'll say, oh, I'm thinking of them. I'll send a text or, very genuine. And it's when I do actually need something, you know, I don't feel bad about reaching out. And I also don't abuse my contacts with asks, right? I think people tend to forget that, like that you should not just go to someone when you need something. You should truly go. Most of the time when you're going to them should be when you don't need something, right? And then you're building that reservoir of trust, of a relationship up before you, you know, have to lean in to make an ask. And I'll say that there's 3 things I really want to leave you guys with, if you don't have it. Coaches, mentors, and sponsors. And I'll just say this. A coach is a person who speaks with you. It's generally a peer. It should be a peer. It can be inside your organization or outside of your organization. They're that person who tells you, do not send that email. You probably will get fired, right? They're the person who talks you off the ledge. You can complain to them all day long. You can be very authentic and transparent. And they're that person to say, it's going to be okay. That's a coach. They speak with you, your peer. There's a mentor. A mentor talks to you, right? So coach is speaking with you, a mentor talks to you, and they can be inside your organization or outside. They guide you on your career steps. Maybe they've been where you have been, or maybe they've been where you want to go. They can guide you on what you should be doing, professional development, things like that. They're speaking to you. There's a sponsor, and people, particularly women and minorities, forget about this so crucial person that you need in your life. That is a sponsor. The sponsor exists inside of your organization, and it's that person who speaks about you when you're not in the room to speak about yourself, because they have the influence that you do not have. So think about that person. So for me, I can say that Loretta Rosenmeyer is a sponsor of mine, right? You think about the coaches, you need them because you got to have that person you can just talk to all the time. You can text, you can bother, and it's fine. They're talking with you. That's your coach. Your mentor has a little bit less time, and they're talking to you. They're giving you guidance, professional development. They're giving you tips to help you find that sponsor. And then lastly, most coveted, most needed is a sponsor. And you'll find that people tend to have 99 mentors, but they don't mention sponsor. It is the one that is left out the most, but is the most crucially needed. So think about that when you think about your network: coaches, mentors, and sponsors. And with that said, I hope that was helpful. It's been great speaking with you guys. I've really enjoyed it. When you guys are back in person, invite me back. I'd love to have a glass of wine with you.
Definitely will do that. And thank you very much. I do appreciate it. And the rest of the group, thank you. At this point, we will back out and break into breakout rooms. And feel free to stay with us, Sherina, and join some breakout rooms. Other than that, thank you very much for joining us. And I hope we can get your CFO to join FEI. So,
Sure will. If he's not one, I'm not sure. I'll have to ask him, but he has my full support. So there.